Captain Alicia Bennett looked at the clock on her office wall. It was already 10:30 p.m. The police station was quiet now, with most officers gone for the day. Only the night shift remained, handling calls at the front desk and patrolling the streets of Cedar Heights. Alicia sighed as she gathered her papers. At 42 years old, she had been with the Cedar Heights Police Department for 17 years. As one of only 3 black female captains in the department's history, she had worked twice as hard as everyone else to earn her position. The light from her desk lamp cast shadows across the walls covered with commendations and community service awards. Tonight, she had stayed late to finish her proposal for a new community outreach program. The project aimed to build better relationships between officers and the neighborhoods they served, especially in areas with higher tensions. "Good night, Captain Bennett," called Officer Rodriguez as Alicia walked through the main area. "Good night, Rodriguez. Stay safe out there," she replied with a tired smile. The night air felt cool against her face as she walked to her car in the back parking lot. Alicia had changed out of her uniform hours ago into plain clothes, jeans, a simple blue blouse, and a light jacket. She never wore her uniform when driving home late. It was safer that way, less attention. Her silver sedan started with a soft purr. The radio came on, playing quiet jazz as she pulled onto the empty streets. Cedar Heights was mostly asleep now, with only a few cars passing by. Alicia thought about stopping for food, but decided against it. Her apartment was only 15 minutes away, and she had leftovers in the fridge. As she drove, Alicia's mind wandered to her childhood. Growing up in this same city, she had rarely seen police officers who looked like her. Her father, a bus driver, had always taught her to be respectful around police, but also cautious. "They don't always see us clearly," he would say. Yet Alicia had chosen this path because she believed things could change from the inside. For nearly 2 decades, she had worked to make the department better, fairer, more understanding, more connected to all the people it served. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her sister Maya. "Did you eat dinner? I know you probably forgot again." Alicia smiled. Maya always checked on her, worrying that Alicia worked too much. She was right, of course. Between her regular duties and the special projects she took on, Alicia rarely had time for herself. Stopping at a red light, she quickly texted back, "Heading home now. Don't worry." The light turned green, and Alicia continued driving. She was only about 5 blocks from her apartment now. These streets were familiar. She had walked them as a teenager, patrolled them as a rookie officer, and now drove them almost every night. In her rearview mirror, Alicia noticed headlights approaching quickly. A police cruiser pulled up behind her, lights flashing but no siren. Her heart skipped despite herself. Even as a police captain, there was always that moment of tension when lights appeared behind you. Probably just running the plate, she thought, pulling over carefully to the right side of the road. The cruiser stopped behind her. Alicia watched in her mirror as 2 officers stepped out, both young men she didn't immediately recognize. They approached cautiously, one on each side of her car. Alicia kept her hands visible on the steering wheel and waited. She knew what happened next would change everything. Officer James Parker approached the driver's side window with his right hand resting near his holster. His partner, Officer Kevin Miller, stood on the passenger side, flashlight beam pointing into the car. It was standard procedure for nighttime traffic stops. "Good evening, ma'am," Officer Parker said, his voice firm but polite. "License and registration, please." Alicia nodded calmly. "Good evening, officer. May I ask why I'm being pulled over?" Parker's face remained serious. "We have reports of a silver sedan involved in an incident earlier tonight. Your vehicle matches the description." Alicia felt a small knot form in her stomach. This was not just a random stop. She kept her hands on the steering wheel where they could see them clearly. "My ID is in my purse on the passenger seat," she said, speaking slowly and clearly. "I'm going to reach for it now, okay?" Officer Parker nodded, but his posture stiffened slightly. "Move slowly, please." As Alicia reached toward her purse, Officer Miller on the passenger side suddenly tensed up. "Keep your hands where we can see them," he called out sharply. Alicia froze, her hand halfway to her purse. "Officer, I'm just reaching for my ID as requested." "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am," Parker ordered, his tone changing. "Officer, there seems to be a misunderstanding." I'm Captain Alicia Bennett with Cedar Heights PT. I'm just trying to show you my identification. The officers exchanged quick glances. Parker's face showed doubt, but Miller seemed unconvinced. Please step out of the vehicle now, Parker repeated, more firmly this time. Alicia took a deep breath. She knew escalating the situation wouldn't help. Years of police training and experience told her to comply now and sort it out later. She carefully opened the door and stepped out. Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle, Miller instructed. Officers, I'm telling you, I'm Captain Bennett from the 5th Precinct. If you call it in. Ma'am, we'll sort this out, but first I need you to follow instructions. Parker cut in. The night air felt suddenly colder as Alicia turned and placed her hands on her car roof. She could feel neighbors watching from their windows. Some had turned on porch lights, curious about the police lights on their quiet street. Officer Miller patted her down while Parker stood watch. The feel of another officer searching her was strange and uncomfortable. In 17 years, she had always been the one conducting searches, never experiencing one herself. No weapons, Miller reported, stepping back. Officers, my police ID is in my purse, if you would just check. We have reports that a vehicle matching yours was involved in a pharmacy break-in an hour ago, Parker explained, his voice still professional but tense. The suspect was described as a woman in dark clothing. Alicia almost laughed at how vague the description was, but the seriousness of the situation stopped her. I've been at the station until just 20 minutes ago. Dozens of officers can confirm that. Parker seemed to hesitate, but Miller was already reaching for his handcuffs. Until we verify your identity, we need to secure the situation, Miller said. The cold metal of handcuffs clicked around Alicia's wrists. She winced, not from pain, but from the surreal feeling of being detained by her own colleagues. Several more neighbors had come out onto their porches now. Some had phones out, recording. Please check my purse, Alicia said quietly. My police ID and captain's badge are there. Officer Parker nodded to Miller, who reached into the car and took her purse. As he searched through it, Alicia stood silently by her car, handcuffed and waiting. A passing car slowed down, the driver watching the scene unfold. Alicia turned her face away, feeling a complex mix of emotions, embarrassment, frustration, and a strange sense of clarity about what so many citizens experienced. We'll sort this out at the station, Parker finally said as Miller closed her purse without finding what they needed. As they led her toward the patrol car, Alicia knew this night would change everything, but not in the way anyone expected. The back seat of the patrol car felt strange to Alicia. In 17 years of police work, she had placed countless people in this very spot, but had never sat here herself. The plastic seat was hard and cold, and the partition between the front and back seats created a barrier that made her feel instantly isolated. Officers, I understand you're doing your job, Alicia said calmly as Officer Parker started the engine. But I'm telling you, this is a serious mistake. I'm Captain Alicia Bennett from the 5th Precinct. Officer Miller turned slightly in his seat. Ma'am, we'll confirm your identity at the station. Right now, we have to follow protocol. Alicia nodded, understanding their position but frustrated by the situation. She watched through the window as her car grew smaller in the distance. She hoped it wouldn't be towed before this misunderstanding was cleared up. The radio crackled with dispatch calls. Alicia recognized the voice of Dispatch Officer Sandra Wells, someone she had worked with for years. If only she could speak to Sandra, this would be resolved instantly. Could you at least radio in and ask about Captain Bennett? Alicia suggested. Just confirm if she's on duty tonight. Parker and Miller exchanged glances. After a moment, Parker reached for his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 45. Can you confirm if Captain Bennett from the 5th Precinct was on duty tonight? Over. The radio crackled. Unit 45, this is Dispatch. Yes, Captain Bennett was working late on the community program proposal. She left about 30 minutes ago. Everything okay? Over. Parker's shoulders tensed visibly. Copy that, Dispatch. Stand by. He put down the radio and glanced at Miller, then at Alicia in the rearview mirror. That doesn't prove you're her, Miller said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. Alicia remained calm. My department ID was in my purse, along with my badge. Did you check the inside zipper pocket? Miller frowned and reached for her purse again, opening the zipper pocket that had been overlooked before. His face changed as he pulled out a police ID and captain's badge. "James," Miller said quietly to his partner, showing him the ID. The atmosphere in the car shifted immediately. Officer Parker pulled over to the side of the road, just 2 blocks from the station. Both officers were silent for a moment, processing what had happened. "Captain Bennett, I," Parker began, turning to face her. "We made a terrible mistake." "Please remove the handcuffs, officer," Alicia said, her voice steady but firm. Miller quickly got out and opened the back door, carefully removing the handcuffs. Alicia rubbed her wrists as she stepped out of the patrol car. "I apologize, Captain," Miller said, looking genuinely distressed. The vehicle description matched, and when you reached for your purse. "I understand the confusion, officers," Alicia interrupted. "But this situation could have been handled differently." A passing police car slowed down, the officer inside clearly surprised to see Captain Bennett standing by a patrol car. The officer waved uncertainly, and Alicia nodded in response. "We should get to the station," she said. "We need to discuss this properly." The short drive to the station was silent and tense. Parker kept glancing at Alicia in the rearview mirror, clearly worried about the consequences of their mistake. Miller stared straight ahead, his face showing a mix of embarrassment and concern. When they arrived at the station, several officers were outside on break. Their casual conversations stopped immediately when they saw Captain Bennett exit the back of a patrol car. Sergeant Williams, a veteran officer who had known Alicia for over a decade, approached quickly. "Captain Bennett, what's going on?" he asked, looking confused. "There's been a misunderstanding, Sergeant," Alicia replied, keeping her voice even. "Officers Parker and Miller mistook me for a suspect." The news spread quickly through the station as they walked inside. Officers and staff members turned to watch, some whispering to each other. The night shift sergeant behind the desk stood up immediately when he saw Alicia. "Captain Bennett, we just got the call from dispatch about the mix-up." Alicia nodded. "I'd like to use conference room B, please. Officers Parker and Miller will be joining me." As they walked through the station, Parker and Miller followed behind her, their steps heavy with the weight of their mistake. What happened next would surprise everyone in the Cedar Heights Police Department. Conference Room B was small but private. The walls were lined with photos of past police chiefs and community service events. Captain Bennett sat at the head of the table while officers Parker and Miller took seats across from each other, both looking uncomfortable. Lieutenant Garcia, the night shift supervisor, knocked on the door. "Captain Bennett, I just heard what happened. Do you want me to call the chief?" he asked, his face serious. Alicia shook her head. "Not yet, Lieutenant. I'd like to speak with these officers first." Garcia nodded and closed the door, leaving the 3 of them alone. The silence that followed felt heavy. Officer Parker fidgeted with his pen while Miller stared at his hands. "I'm not going to yell," Alicia finally said. Both officers looked up, surprised. "That's not how I handle things, and it wouldn't help anyone." She took a deep breath and continued. "What I want to understand is what happened from your perspective. Officer Parker, please explain your actions tonight." Parker cleared his throat. "Captain, we received a call about a pharmacy break-in on Maple Street. The suspect was described as driving a silver sedan, similar to yours. When we spotted your vehicle in the area, we decided to make a stop to check. And when I reached for my ID?" Alicia prompted. Parker hesitated. "We couldn't see your hands clearly, and with the recent reports of officers being attacked during traffic stops, we followed protocol for a high-risk situation." Miller spoke up. "Captain, I was the one who suggested handcuffs. That's on me. I failed to properly check your purse for identification first." Alicia nodded, listening carefully. "Let me tell you what I experienced," she said calmly. "I experienced being treated as a suspect despite identifying myself as a police captain. I experienced being handcuffed on my own street, where my neighbors could see. I experienced sitting in the back of a patrol car for the first time in my 17-year career." Both officers looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "But here's what I didn't experience," Alicia continued. "I didn't experience being thrown to the ground. I wasn't spoken to disrespectfully. I wasn't threatened or manhandled. You followed procedure, even if that procedure was triggered by a mistake." Parker and Miller exchanged confused glances, clearly not expecting this response. Captain, are you saying you're not filing a complaint? Miller asked hesitantly. Alicia leaned forward. What I'm saying is that this situation gives us a unique opportunity. Tomorrow, I want both of you in my office at 9 a.m. Bring your body camera footage. We're going to review it together. For disciplinary action. Parker asked, his voice tight. For learning, Alicia corrected. This department has been working on improving community relations for years. Now we have a real example to learn from, one that involves our own officers and command staff. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet parking lot. Do you know what I was thinking about when you pulled me over? I was thinking about my father. He always told me to be extra careful around police, even though I became an officer myself. Turning back to face them, she continued. Many of our citizens feel that same fear when they see lights flashing behind them. Tonight, I felt it too, and that perspective is valuable. Officer Miller looked up, his face showing surprise. You're turning this into a training opportunity. Exactly, Alicia said with a small smile. What happened tonight was unfortunate, but nobody was hurt. Instead of anger or punishment, I choose to make this a moment for growth. The tension in the room began to ease slightly. Officer Parker straightened in his chair. I don't understand, Captain. Most people in your position would be demanding our badges, he said. I'm not most people, Alicia replied calmly. And I didn't become a captain by tearing others down. I got here by building people up, by teaching and learning. She walked to the door but stopped before opening it. Officers, this isn't over. There will be paperwork and there will be conversations. But how we handle this matters more than the mistake itself. Remember that. As she left the conference room, both officers sat in silence, processing what had just happened. Outside, Lieutenant Garcia waited anxiously. Everything okay, Captain? He asked. Alicia smiled slightly. Not yet, Lieutenant. But it will be. By morning, news of Captain Bennett's mistaken arrest had spread through the entire Cedar Heights Police Department. When Alicia arrived at work at 8:30 a.m., she could feel eyes following her as she walked to her office. Some officers looked away quickly, embarrassed. Others nodded respectfully, their faces showing concern. Chief Raymond Wilson was waiting by her office door. At 62, Wilson had been chief for 11 years and had personally promoted Alicia to captain 2 years ago. Alicia, I just heard what happened, he said, his voice low. Why didn't you call me last night? She unlocked her office door and gestured for him to enter, because I wanted time to think about how to handle this properly. Flying off the handle wouldn't help anyone. The chief took a seat across from her desk, shaking his head. Those officers should have verified your identity immediately. This is completely unacceptable. Yes, it was a mistake, Alicia agreed, setting down her bag. But it's also an opportunity. Before the chief could respond, there was a knock at the door. Officers Parker and Miller stood in the doorway, both in clean uniforms, their expressions serious. You asked us to be here at 9 o'clock, Captain, Parker said, glancing nervously at the chief. Come in, officers, Alicia said. Chief Wilson was just getting caught up on the situation. The two officers entered and stood at attention, clearly expecting the worst. Chief Wilson stood up, his face stern. Do you two realize the seriousness of what happened last night? He asked. Yes, sir, they answered in unison. Alicia raised a hand. Chief, with your permission, I'd like to handle this my way. Wilson looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. It's your call, Captain. He turned to leave but paused at the door. I expect a full report on my desk by the end of the day. After the chief left, Alicia motioned for the officers to sit down. Did you bring the body camera footage? Officer Miller handed her a small flash drive. It's all here, Captain. Both of our cameras, from the moment we spotted your vehicle until we arrived at the station. Alicia connected the drive to her computer and turned the screen so they could all see it. For the next 20 minutes, they watched the events of the previous night unfold from the officers' perspectives. The footage was revealing. From Parker's camera, Alicia could see herself as they had seen her, a woman in dark clothes, reaching suddenly toward the passenger seat. From Miller's angle, the interior of the car was poorly lit, making it difficult to see what she was reaching for. When the video ended, Alicia turned to the officers. "What do you see?" Miller spoke first. "I see that we acted too quickly. We should have asked you to describe where your ID was before you reached for it." Parker nodded. "And we should have checked your ID more thoroughly when you first mentioned being a captain." "Yes," Alicia agreed. "But I also see two officers following procedure for what they perceived as a potentially dangerous situation. You maintained professional language. You explained why you were stopping me." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the busy police parking lot. "What happened last night wasn't just about me, or about you too. It's about how we police our community." Turning back to face them, she continued, "Many citizens in our community, especially people of color, fear these kinds of interactions. The difference is, I knew exactly what to do, how to act, what to say. Many don't have that knowledge or training." The officers listened intently as she continued. "I've decided not to file formal disciplinary charges," she said. Both officers' faces showed surprise and relief. Instead, Alicia continued, "I want to use this incident to create something positive. I'm developing a new training program about traffic stops, and I want both of you to help me." "Us?" Parker asked, clearly confused. Alicia nodded. "Yes, this experience gave all of us valuable perspective. Me as the person being stopped, and you as officers learning from a mistake. Together, we can turn this into a teaching moment for the entire department." Miller leaned forward. "Captain, I don't understand. Why aren't you angry?" "Who says I'm not?" Alicia replied with a small smile. "But anger doesn't solve problems. Actions do. And I've always believed that how we respond to difficult situations defines who we are." She handed them each a folder. "These are the outlines for the training program I'm proposing. Review them and meet me tomorrow with your thoughts." As the officers left her office, Sergeant Williams appeared in the doorway. "The whole department is talking about what happened, Captain," he said, "and about how you're handling it." "Good," Alicia replied, "because what happens next is going to surprise everyone." 1 week after the incident, Captain Alicia Bennett stood at the front of the department's largest conference room. Every seat was filled with officers from all ranks and divisions. Chief Wilson sat in the front row, his expression serious but supportive. Officers Parker and Miller stood nervously beside Alicia, unsure of their role in this unusual gathering. "Thank you all for coming," Alicia began, her voice clear and confident. "Most of you have heard about what happened last week. I was mistakenly detained by two of our officers while driving home in plain clothes." Whispers spread through the room. Some officers looked uncomfortable, while others seemed curious about why this meeting had been called. "I could have handled this situation in many ways," she continued. "I could have demanded disciplinary action. I could have filed formal complaints. I could have gone to the media with claims of bias or profiling." The room grew completely silent as everyone waited for what would come next. Instead, Alicia said, surprising them all with a smile, "I want to thank Officers Parker and Miller for giving me an incredible gift." Confused looks spread across the room. Parker and Miller exchanged glances, equally puzzled. "The gift of perspective," she explained. "For 17 years, I've worn this badge, but I've never truly experienced what it feels like to be on the other side of it. Now I have, and it's changed how I see our work forever." She clicked a button, and the body camera footage began playing on the large screen behind her. The room watched in silence as the events unfolded. "I've reviewed this footage more than 20 times, Alicia said when it ended. "And each time, I see something new. I see mistakes, yes, but I also see opportunities for all of us to learn and grow." Chief Wilson nodded in agreement, though many officers still looked confused about where this was heading. "Starting next month," Alicia announced, "our department will implement a new training program called Both Sides of the Badge. It will focus on helping officers understand the citizen experience during police interactions, particularly traffic stops." She motioned for Parker and Miller to step forward. "Officers Parker and Miller have agreed to help develop this program based on our shared experience. They've shown remarkable courage in facing their mistake directly and turning it into something positive." The two officers stood straighter, their faces showing a mix of pride and relief. "But this program needs more than just our perspectives," Alicia continued. "We'll be inviting community members to participate, to share their experiences and feelings during police encounters. We'll create scenarios that put officers in the position of being stopped, questioned, and even detained. Some officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but others were nodding with interest. We protect and serve this community, Alicia said, her voice growing passionate. But too often, we forget what it feels like to be served rather than to serve. This program will remind us. She picked up a stack of papers from the podium. I prepared detailed proposals for each department. This isn't just a one-day sensitivity training. This is a complete shift in how we approach our interactions with the public. Lieutenant Garcia raised his hand. Captain, with all due respect, aren't you letting these officers off too easily? They made a serious mistake. Alicia nodded. They did, Lieutenant. And in acknowledging that mistake, they've shown more courage than many would. The easy path would be punishment followed by resentment. The harder path, the one with real growth, is what we're choosing instead. She walked to where Parker and Miller stood. These officers didn't see me as Captain Bennett that night. They saw a potential suspect. And that's something we all need to examine within ourselves, how quickly we categorize people based on limited information. Chief Wilson stood up. I've reviewed Captain Bennett's proposal, and I'm fully supporting it. This department has always prided itself on being progressive, but this program takes us to a new level of self-awareness and community connection. As the meeting continued, officers began asking questions, some skeptical, others enthusiastic. Through it all, Alicia maintained her composure and conviction. At the end of the meeting, Sergeant Williams approached her. This is not what anyone expected, Captain, he said quietly. Sometimes the unexpected response is exactly what's needed, Sergeant. Alicia replied with a smile. Sometimes it's the thing that changes everything. 3 months after the incident, the Cedar Heights Police Department was a different place. Captain Bennett's Both Sides of the Badge program had grown from a simple training idea into a department-wide movement. The training room was set up for today's session, with chairs arranged in a circle rather than the traditional rows facing forward. Remember, this isn't about blame, Alicia reminded officers Parker and Miller as they prepared to lead their third training session. It's about understanding. The two officers nodded, no longer nervous but confident in their roles. What had begun as their greatest mistake had transformed into an opportunity for leadership. The new recruits are always the most skeptical, Parker said, organizing his notes. But they usually leave with the most changed perspectives. Alicia smiled. That's because you two speak from experience. There's power in admitting mistakes and showing how to learn from them. The door opened and 20 officers filed in, a mix of rookies and veterans. Among them were also 5 community members, local residents who had volunteered to share their experiences with police interactions. Welcome everyone, Alicia began once they were seated. Today's session might be uncomfortable at times, but that discomfort is where real growth happens. She stepped back and allowed Parker to take the lead. 3 months ago, I made a mistake that could have ended my career, he said, his voice steady. Officer Miller and I mistakenly detained our own captain. Some of the rookies looked surprised, while the veterans who already knew the story nodded gravely. Miller continued, We're going to show you our body camera footage, then Captain Bennett will share what she experienced. After that, our community volunteers will share their stories. As the footage played, Alicia watched the faces in the room. Some officers winced at certain moments. Others took notes. The community members watched with particular interest, occasionally exchanging glances. When the video ended, Alicia stepped forward. When those lights flashed behind me that night, my first feeling wasn't anger or even surprise, she said. It was fear. Despite being a captain with 17 years on the force, my heart raced. My mouth went dry. I was afraid. The room was completely silent. That fear is what many citizens feel during traffic stops, especially in communities that have historically complicated relationships with police, she continued. Understanding that fear, really feeling it, changed how I approach my job. One of the community volunteers, Mrs. Jackson, an elderly black woman from the east side of Cedar Heights, spoke next. I've been stopped by police 4 times in my life, she said quietly. Each time, I was terrified, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Watching that footage of Captain Bennett being handcuffed was the first time I've ever seen an officer understand what that feels like. The training continued for 3 hours. Officers and community members shared stories, asked difficult questions, and sometimes disagreed. But throughout, there was a sense of genuine connection that hadn't existed before. Near the end of the session, Chief Wilson arrived. He stood at the back of the room, observing without interrupting. For our final exercise, Alicia announced, "We're going to do role reversal. Officers will experience being stopped and questioned, while our community volunteers will play the role of officers." Some officers looked uncomfortable, but they all participated. The rookies especially seemed affected by being on the receiving end of authority, even in a training scenario. After the session ended and people were leaving, Chief Wilson approached Alicia. "The State Police Commissioner called me this morning," he said. "Word about your program has spread. They want you to present it at the state conference next month." Alicia looked surprised. "The state conference? That's a big platform." Wilson nodded. "What started as a mistake has become a model, Captain. Other departments want to learn from us now." As they walked out together, they passed the department bulletin board. A new notice announced community applications for the Police Advisory Council, another initiative that had grown from the incident. "You know what the most surprising thing is?" Wilson said. "Complaints against our officers are down 30% since your program started." Alicia smiled. "That's because understanding changes behavior on both sides of the badge." Outside, Officers Parker and Miller were talking with Mrs. Jackson and the other community volunteers, laughing together like old friends. The barriers that had once seemed permanent were slowly coming down. This was more than a training program now. It was becoming a transformation. 1 year after the night of her mistaken arrest, Captain Alicia Bennett stood on a stage in Washington, D.C., looking out at an audience of police chiefs, community leaders, and government officials from across the country. The large conference hall was filled to capacity, with people standing along the walls just to hear her speak. "When I was handcuffed on a quiet street in Cedar Heights," she began, "I never imagined that moment would lead me here today." Behind her, a large screen showed photos of the both sides of the badge program in action, officers role-playing as civilians, community members sharing their stories, and training sessions filled with honest conversations. What began as a single incident in our department has now been adopted by 47 police departments across 8 states. Alicia continued, her voice strong and clear. "And each department has added their own improvements to make it even better." In the front row, Chief Wilson sat proudly next to Officers Parker and Miller, who had traveled to Washington with Alicia for this national policing conference. Both officers wore new pins on their uniforms, silver badges that identified them as certified trainers for the program. "The most powerful change isn't in our policies or procedures," Alicia said. "It's in our hearts and minds. When officers truly understand how it feels to be on the other side of authority, they police differently. And when community members see officers acknowledging mistakes and working to learn from them, trust begins to grow." She clicked to the next slide, showing statistics from Cedar Heights. Complaints against officers were down 42% since the program began. Community satisfaction ratings had increased by 35%. Officer job satisfaction had improved as well. "These numbers tell a story," she explained, "but the real story is in the individual relationships being built." Former critics of our department now serve on our advisory boards. Officers who once viewed community meetings as obligations now see them as opportunities. From her seat in the second row, Mrs. Jackson, now the head of the Cedar Heights Community Police Partnership, smiled encouragingly at Alicia. "The mistake that led to my detention wasn't just about race, though that was certainly a factor," Alicia acknowledged. "It was about how quickly we make judgments, how easily we forget to see the humanity in each other, and how important it is to respond to mistakes with wisdom rather than anger." As she continued her presentation, Alicia noticed a woman at the back of the room taking detailed notes. She recognized her as an advisor to the president on police reform initiatives. "The path forward isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame," Alicia said as she approached her conclusion. "It's about having the courage to stand in each other's shoes, to feel what others feel, and to create systems that protect both officer safety and citizen dignity." When the presentation ended, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Chief Wilson was the first on his feet, followed quickly by Parker and Miller. Later that evening, at a small dinner with her team, Alicia raised a glass in a toast. "To mistakes that become missions," she said with a smile. Parker shook his head in amazement. When we put those handcuffs on you that night, I thought my career was over. I never imagined it would be just beginning. Miller nodded in agreement. You could have ruined us, Captain. Instead, you lifted us up. You gave us purpose. Chief Wilson leaned forward. The Justice Department called today. They want to make your program a national standard for police training. They're offering funding to help us expand it. Alicia looked around the table at her colleagues, once just fellow officers, now partners in something much bigger than themselves. The handcuffs that night were tight, she said quietly, but they loosened something much more important. They broke open our understanding of what policing can be. As they continued their meal, Alicia's phone buzzed with a message. It was a photo from Mrs. Jackson showing the latest community police meeting back in Cedar Heights. The room was packed with citizens and officers, sitting together, talking openly. The caption read, "Your legacy grows even when you're away. Thank you for turning pain into progress." Alicia smiled, knowing that what had started with one difficult night had become something that would outlast her career, something that might change policing for generations to come. Sometimes, the most shocking response to injustice is not anger, but wisdom, and sometimes that wisdom changes everything.